and welcome back, subscribers, to another story time, as well as me doing a show and tell of how I learned how to draw furries back in high school, the pros and cons of using tutorial books, and how it affected my art over the years. So firstly, I have these two books, Drawing Furries and Draw More Furries. So these books were rather expensive at the time. I invested a good $25 around after tax, and these were great guidelines. But one of the things that I wanted to share with you guys of my viewpoints of them now versus how I saw them back in high school is these are great if I wanted to learn the techniques of how this artist had learned how to draw and was teaching it to us, the audience. Through the book that they had made, one of the key features that I had noticed, I eventually gained an eye for breaking things down to its core and comparing them, and in my opinion, doing this can sometimes hinder how an artist may receive this as criticism versus someone's opinion of oh, I don't like it, it's too realistic, versus the criticisms of this is a great way to teach people how to draw realistic furries, but also if that is within their art kind of thingy, showing some comparisons of how to draw them in a more cartoonistic style if it is something that they can do. I don't know if that came across at all how I wanted it to, but with this book, there were many different ways of how they showed, they showed most of the basics of how to construct and create scenes and anthropomorphic characters with what I gathered of taking a human and a animal and combining the two together, but not quite pushing proportions and showing shape language, which is something that I learned on my own / through other creators who did expand upon this, because I'm gonna say this very clear, they have gorgeous artwork. This art book is something that I still hold on to because they have immaculate art styles, but the cons of this is only one person's technique, this is only one person's way of how they draw, and it is great to have many, and I mean many sources and many outlets for these kinds of thingies, because when you're drawing something out of your head, it is going to look so much different. It's like handing someone a piece of paper and saying, you draw the sketch, and then I'm going to take it to a completely different person and they're going to do the line artwork. They're not going to draw over top of that line art unless they are specifically instructed, alright, you have to draw exactly like this person did before you, and keep the train rolling by handing it to someone else and coloring it, not knowing how the previous person did their sketch, not knowing how the previous person did their line art, not knowing how the previous person did the colors, trying to make them all do the same picture in the same technique, in the same style, when they're completely different people. I hope that came across okay, I hope that was me explaining that well, but that was how it was in my head when I was trying to piece together where these people got this from. Having the stuff in front of me was one thing, versus I didn't have the brain, I didn't have their eyes, I didn't have their hands to get to see how they did it, because these were still images, even though they were step by step. Even with speed paints, when I watch someone else's technique, I don't get to see all the brushes they use, I don't get to see what pen pressure they have, I don't get to see if they're wearing a smudge guard or not, and a lot of those missing pieces go into the fact that that is how an individual uses their own techniques. And what I mean by techniques versus tools is when people say art style, it goes down further than style. Style could be like saying that is the style of Gravity Falls, or that is the style of Pokemon. Getting further down to it, what softwares do they use is the tools, whether they are using a digital program, a traditional program, whether they are using pencil and paper, you name it, to the technique, which is how they utilize those tools, whether they are wanting something that is cel-shaded, something that looks like it's made out of pencil and paper, whether they are using 3D modeled techniques. That is something that I hope comes across clearly when I say that I didn't know at first what I wanted because of how school taught us of you would use what was available to you, which was pencils or paints, to draw that, but I never really learned how to do it on my own of how I wanted to until I got my hands on my tablet and realized I love doing digital artwork because it was easier for me. Drawing with pencil and paper was alright, but for some reason I had more creative flow when I was using digital artwork. And merging the styles, I hope that this shows with that picture that I have, was I was trying to draw a wolf character quite closely to that book style, but as you saw, it doesn't. I could spend years trying to mimic that book style and failing, because that is not how I would use the techniques with the tools given to me, because that book was also with digital art. I was using pencil, two completely different tools and two completely different techniques, until around 2019 when I realized that I could indeed create what was in my head down on paper by just experimenting and having fun with the techniques and tools that I had. It was still great to learn what cell shading and stuff like that was for like the techniques, because that taught me of like, okay, well I want to create my own technique of cell shading. There were some foundations and fundamentals that were out there pre-existing that I could use at my disposal. Like I said, giving someone the same thing to draw, they're gonna have many different techniques and styles, even if you try to force them to make the same thing. This showed quite a lot, actually, in my high school, and I hope that this is something that some people can learn from, is that there are many different ways people see things, and when you put that down onto paper or digital or paintings or whatever it is, you're gonna have quite a different outlook on it, even if you try to teach them all the same thing. I mean, take for example Vixie over the years. Even from the same artist, I've drawn her many different ways because I've used many different tools and techniques, and it's drastically changed because, I mean, even over the years to come, she's gonna look drastically different because of how I see her in my head will probably change over time, and some of the techniques that I learned will probably improve or maybe not quite so improve on how I draw her. Whether I want to change her to be realistic and overly textured or whether I want to keep her simplified and no shading whatsoever is up to me, and it's something fun that I hope that in a weird way I've kind of taught you guys something, or at least showed you guys a different way of viewing things. If you guys want a part 2 on how I learned how to draw on my own rather than these books, let me know in the comment section down below. I can try and do a more sort of explained version. But if you're not already part of that subscriber squad, be sure to put your paws to that subscribe button and turn on notifications for weekly content. And I have a link tree for ways to support the channel. Thank you all so much, subscribers. Stay possum. Bye-bye!